Prime Minister Scott Morrison visited my family's home city of Lismore yesterday, telling us it was important for disaster victims to think of the next step in their recovery. Key points. The Prime Minister says it's important for flood victims to focus on the next step in the recovery process. Some survivors are still questioning why civilians were responsible for so many rescues. NSW Premier Dominic Perrottet admits many aspects of the response were unacceptable. But many residents of flood-ravaged northern New South Wales are still grappling with the shock of almost losing their lives. 5 people have so far been confirmed across the region, while many are in disbelief the toll was not higher after scores of desperate rescues and failed attempts to reach emergency services. They don't blame the Australian Defence Force or the State Emergency Service, but know something has gone awry, and someone needs to be held accountable when no one answers a 000 call and they are left screaming from rooftops and ceiling cavities. Prime Minister Scott Morrison visited Lismore's Norco ice cream factory. When asked who people should blame for the lack of resourcing that resulted in mass civilian-led rescues, Mr. Morrison told local media, "I think we have to be realistic that in any natural disaster, we don't have those resources just waiting around the corner," he said. "There will be a community response because the community is already there." Northern Rivers residents responded in droves to Mr. Morrison's comments, as they were streamed live on the ABC North Coast Facebook page. Who's responsible for rescuing people? Trained people are meant to rescue people in dangerous situations. I hope you don't find yourself in a dangerous situation, ScoMo, and rely on your neighbours to help you out instead of emergency services. MIA Gkotsis. It's not a combination of community and government response. It was solely the community for a whole week. To Neil O'Brien. A whip around the region will reveal every second local from Tweed to Grafton has their own miraculous rescue story of an everyday hero waiting around the corner. And they still want those stories to be heard. Whether it was 2 blokes in a tinny saving families stranded on rooftops, an elderly neighbour rescued from a floating bed, or boatloads of residents plucked from swallowed caravans. Jules Parker helped save her elderly neighbour Jim from floodwaters. My story involves my grandparents, Kathleen and Norman Clapham, aged 84 and 85. They live in downtown Lismore, in a house raised a few feet above the 1974 flood height. So, when an SES volunteer visited them in the wee hours before the city's levee overtopped, they were told they could stay at home, as the predicted flood level wouldn't wet their feet. Kathleen and Norman Clapham's home flooded even after it was raised in the wake of the 1974 floods. Mere moments later they were up to their necks, holding a bag of medicine and their dog Missy above their heads, while yelling into the darkness for help from their second-story balcony. Their anxious family called 000 only to hear a recorded message urging flood victims to try the SES. A call to the SES was met with another recorded message urging people to instead try 000. And so it went, back and forth, until someone, anyone, would finally pick up. Kathleen and Norman Clapham, after being rescued from their Lismore home. When Kathleen and Norman appeared shaken and sodden on the TV news being lifted out of a boat later that morning, I assumed the authorities had finally answered and reached them. But it was a man named Craig Beck from up the hill who heard their calls and rescued them with his canoe. We may never know just how many Craigs were out there in the height of the floods, or how many people they saved, but photos and videos show hordes of self-organizing civilians who the SES asked to assist in a call-out on ABC North Coast Radio on Monday morning. That call later changed, with the SES asking civilians to stay out of the water when it became too dangerous. Cries for help on social media, and a spreadsheet created by Sally Flannery after she was rescued from a Lismore rooftop, are also being hailed as saving the lives of countless people. Kathleen and Norman Clapham were among many that Craig Beck rescued. The SES recorded 408 call-outs in Lismore in the 24 hours until 4 a.m. on Monday, February 28. The same morning, 374 calls for help were made within 30 minutes, but it's impossible to know how many attempted calls didn't make it through. As of Wednesday, all evacuation orders across the northern rivers had been lifted, and, since flooding began on February 22nd, hundreds of volunteers from 23 Northern Rivers SES units have responded to 5,266 requests for assistance, including more than 1,500 rescues. Thousands of homes are uninhabitable. The community is thankful for those overworked SES volunteers, but also want answers from the state and federal governments as to what went wrong. NSW Premier Dominic Perrottet has admitted aspects of the emergency flood response were unacceptable, and people should not have had to rely on civilian rescuers to survive. He said his government would be thoroughly reflecting on problems, resourcing, and the amount of time people had to evacuate. The Prime Minister says it is important to keep looking forward. What's the next step ahead? Getting the rubbish off the street, he said. The northern rivers will continue cleaning up that rubbish as the rescue stories continue to flood in, and mourn the lives lost while coming to terms with their own lives risked and saved. Local news direct ABC North Coast will deliver a wrap of the week's news, stories and photos every Friday. To stay connected,